I'm going to go live on the internet as well.
Okay.
Okay, Patrina, you are on.
Welcome to Church Biz. I am your host, Reverend Patrina White McClure. I do so thank you for tuning in today as I have one of my favorite people here with me on today as my special guest. But before we get to him, let me remind you that WCEG is your worldwide community empowerment group. So if you want to find a way to make your time and your finances useful, give us a call. You can call us at 404-619-1402. But on today's show, my favorite man in the world is my father, the Dr. R.L. White Jr. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Patrina. Glad to hear your voice and glad to see you.
Same here. Glad to see you too. With this social distancing, all of us kind of have been experiencing a kind of physical disconnect, but we know that the love is still strong.
Oh yes, that love transcends everything else.
Exactly. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell the WCEG and Church Biz listeners about yourself?
All right, I am Dr. R.L. White. I have been living in Atlanta since October 1969, which is like 51, 52 years almost. We started at Mount Ephraim Baptist Church, where I am currently the pastor, and we're celebrating this week coming up 50 years of having been organized. I live in Marietta, Georgia, with my wife, Lorraine Jock White, and I got children like talking to me now and across the country. So that's about it.
Oh, well, it's a lot to the story, but that was the short version. But you are a respected community leader, civil rights leader, you pastor, counselor. You have a whole lot of titles, but of course, we know you as dad, but you're also my spiritual father, one of my best friends, somebody I can talk to. And I'm just so grateful that you are my dad. But today we're going to talk about the essence of a father. And even though it's almost a simple subject, but it's really complex, the essence of a father. And out of your thousands of hours of providing sound advice and decades of counseling, what do you say a father is? What does he look like to you today?
First of all, a father looks like the image, or is the image that every child should be able to emulate. And that means that a father should live a life before his children that they can be proud of, and that helps them to go into a livelihood that does not bring about crime, but for them to feel loved and wanted. The children should feel that way. And when they do feel that way, actually, if you get that much in, if they know that they're cared about, is the most important thing.
I know that we always felt cared about all of your kids. We knew that you loved us regardless as to our circumstances, because people over the years have assumed we had the perfect family growing up. And when Chris Lawrence and I lived up north while Tiffany and Eudora were down south with you. And so you had to parent from a distance. So what do you say about those kids or those people who struggle, who didn't have their father in the household with them? Because not only were you a father to us, but a spiritual father to others, a substitute or surrogate father for other people. There were some people who just needed that fatherly figure in their lives, and you were that person. You fulfilled the role of many types of fathers. So what do you say about that when people say, I don't know what to do as a father because I didn't have mine?
Well, and you're right. Uh, Three of my children lived up north, and two lived here with me. But the one thing that I always insisted on doing, and that was like at summertime, I would either go get them or fly them down to Atlanta, and we would spend a lot of time together. Now, what a father really should, even if the father is not in the home, the father needs to have a relationship with his children. And whenever you have a relationship with your children, then miles are not the problem.
Right, right. And that's what I know Chris Lawrence and I felt, even though we were in Maryland, the DC area, or they call it the DMV now. Um, we still felt the love. We knew we were loved, and we knew that you would talk to us. Because I remember we used to say, "Why don't you call us?" You said, "Well, you can pick up the phone and give me a call too, and let me make sure you have my contact information, my address." You made it where we could get in touch with you if we needed you.
Oh, yes, indeed. I've always wanted to do that. And I've always been happy about the fact that when I would drive up to get you, and you would, all three of you would be just looking in the window. You could not wait when that car pulled up. I mean, you all came running out, and it was a great time.
Yes, it was. So many, many, many wonderful memories. Exciting, fun. Some of it was funny. So, we had a great relation, or still have a great relationship with you. But it also helped us as we begin to parent our own kids. We, of course, we learned stuff from our mom, but we also learned stuff from you, because you were a part of us and not separated, where we had to wonder, where is he? What is he doing? What would dad say? Because I remember there were times when we would talk and you would give us sound advice every time, which we still use.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And it was my pleasure because it showed me that my emotions were returned, that you all loved me. And since you loved me, it was not hard for me to say to you some things that I thought maybe you should do. I, I was thinking of the other night of the time that I wanted my children to have a car in DC. And I went and bought this car. Now I knew it was junk, but I drove it up, and Chris and Lawrence loved that old beat up car. But it was one way of my saying to them, hey, I love you guys, and whatever you need, I'll give it to you.
Right. And they still mention that car every now and then.
I think I've learned a little better since, but it wasn't the ragged car. I think the message that it sent, that,
Right.
hey, dad cares about us. And I do, and all of my children, I love you all the same.
And as well, we know that you were trying your best, regardless of our situation. You were still putting forth effort, and that's what we're grateful for.
Well, it wasn't hard putting forth the effort because you all were great kids.
Oh, thank you. um I remember talking to so many other people, especially when I go do jail ministry, or I see a lot of social ills in the country today. And a lot of the kids lack fathers. What would you tell those young people to do if their fathers just weren't participating? Because so many men feel like, well, their mama got it. And they feel like they have a license to walk off, you know.
Well, what that means is that they do not want the responsibility of being what a father is. Too many times it equates to them how much I got to pay per month. And then once they send that little money in, they think they have done everything that a father should do. But in our society now, it still takes a man influence in the children's life so that they can know what a man is supposed to do for his children, because one day they're going to have children too, like you all have children. I think you all have been excellently well, because you make sure that your children are taken care of. And you can do that whether you are in or out the house.
Amen. I think that's because we were able to learn that lesson from you, regardless as to our situations. We have to have that connection with our children, make sure that they have all that they need. Because even me, when my kids were small, I couldn't function unless I knew that my kids had all their needs met. Like if I had to go sing somewhere or minister, I made sure their basic needs were satisfied before I went to minister, because I couldn't imagine going out there and my kids are hungry while I'm in the pulpit or I'm helping somebody else's kids. So I think we learned that from you. And as well, Eudora, she's listening in on today, so I have to give her shout out, because she's like, I gotta listen.
Well, I want Eudora to know that I'm glad she's listening to today. I remember that many times I used to go to revival, and I taught you all how to sing mostly. And you were my only choir. And when I would get up to preach, I said, I want my children to come and sing for me. And you all were just great. And I think that was one thing that kept us together. I've been trying to get your daughter to kind of tune it up a little bit, but she's not quite as interested.
Well, she's on the low. She's been working on it. She's coming around. Yeah.
Well, that's great now. But Tiffany, I don't think she has anything to do with singing, does she?
No. She said, if we don't want to hear any bad sounds, don't ask her to sing.
But the thing is, all of our children have the freedom to have their own individuality. And that's the one thing that is very important. Now, that was a guy named Abraham Maslow, who talked about the hierarchy of human needs. And it was like a pyramid. And on the first step, it said that a child has to have his biological needs met, like food, shelter, clothing, all of those things that you have to have. But then it said on the second rung of the ladder, a child must also feel loved, protection, to feel needed. Those on that second rung of the ladder, he goes on up to the hierarchy there. And he says, and what they call that was his actualization theory, that you can never become all you can be unless those first two rungs are really learned. And that's very, very important.
Also, a part of that would be how your parenting style taught us how we need to be busy about finding out our purpose so that we could do the work that God has called us. And I believe that that is a parental responsibility to help assist that child to try to identify what their calling is, in addition to making sure they have all their basic needs met. Because I've noticed even with a lot of your athletes, actors, their parental support was that strong. So I learned to adapt that principle and let me help my kids find out what they are supposed to do, as opposed to what I think they should do, because they could be sinning if they do what I tell them to do.
Well, one thing, you should not try to live your life through your kids. One thing that I've always wanted to do is to make sure that each of my children went into what they wanted to be. And then I've tried to reaffirm them. And one thing that I've tried to do is let each of you say what you want to say, whether I agree with you or not. And it helps, like the communication. And we're not a family, well, I'm not, I guess, where I have to call 2 or 3 times a week. But what it is, the moment you need me, or vice versa. That moment, I'll be there. And what Eudora has taken on now is she's the one that calls every week. Hey guys, is everybody all right? So I'll hit, I'm doing fine. Each one of you do the same. And that's very important because it means that you feel the love. I remember last week, well, actually, Tiffany's birthday was on June the 2nd. And Eudora got in touch with her because she didn't know I had already known about it. And I didn't forget it. But Tiffany, who lives in Memphis, she sent us a note saying, you guys make me feel so loved and special. And I texted her back, you are special. It has to be that kind of link between all of the children.
Exactly. And I hate it when some parents like some of their kids, but not all of their kids. And before you respond to that, let me remind everybody that they're listening to WCEG Network's Church Biz. If you want to call in and talk with the Dr. R.L. White, give us a call at 646-876-9923. That is 646-876-9923, so that you can go ahead and talk with Dr. White, whether you have a question, want to make a comment, or what have you. But will you respond to what I said before I did the call information?
Now, rephrase that.
Okay. I think I kind of forgot what it was too. But there's just a lot to say about parenting, but some parents, they don't like to change, especially a lot of fathers. They feel disrespected because they don't understand that being a father requires them to change with the needs of the children. So then they get upset if the child operates outside of the parameters that they placed on the child. And it doesn't mean that the child did anything wrong. It just means that because they're different, they have different needs. You have to address those while you maintain the principle of respect, love, the habits of communication. Sometimes fathers feel like, wow, that's a big blow in my face, but it's my way or the highway.
And that's a very bad thing to do. Every child, even before they get grown, the parent needs to listen to the child. Too many times the parent wants to be heard, but they don't want to hear. And nothing is communicated until something is understood. So when the child's perception of life is different, and as you know, perception is more sometimes stronger than reality. But we have to deal with the child's perception. And then while you allow the child to make up in their mind what it is they would like to do, and let them feel your support, that, hey, I'm with you all the way. Let me see you do good at what you want to do. And I think that's what most parents sometimes miss.
I think, do they approach parenting as in, this is what I think it should go, as opposed to how it should go, and then they'll keep working from that model only to discover they made a mess?
What happens is we look back on how our parents used to do us, and then sometimes we adopt that model for our children coming along. But just like you just said, times change, perceptions change, and the parent has to be able to say, hey, let me hear where you are. And then I have to also be willing to make changes. And if a parent cannot make a change, then they're going to have some trouble. That's when we call them set in their ways.
Yes, a lot of parents have made that mistake. But one of the key things that you have done over the years is to keep that line of communication. You made us not feel bad for approaching you on any given subject, because we figured it out years ago. If you're talking to everybody else about everything, then why can't we come to you? But you never made us feel bad. And so can you talk about that?
Oh
Keep
yeah.
yeah.
You know, communication is one of the key things about being successful in life. You know, whenever you all and I got on the bad side of each other,
Uh-huh.
the one thing that I would do, even if I punish you, and I want to say this, that you all were so good, I never really had to punish you. The thing that I would do would be sit down with you and say, now, do you understand why I'm saying what I'm saying? In other words, I had to make sure that you understood. And I remember one time I said, now, I got to spank you, but you have got to understand why. And whenever that was, and I got with you kids, you would always tell me, I understand. That way I knew that we were on the same wavelength. But it would hurt me so much to put you all under punishment. Most of the time you talk me out of
it. Well, I'm glad that worked. But that's a whole nother issue in itself. Let me mention Joseph Howard says hello and he loves us.
Well, Joseph, we love you too, Joseph. And you know, since he's got that little baby, he's still jumping up and down.
Yes,
I
yes.
think he's being an excellent father too.
Yes, he is. I honor all the fathers in my life. And he's such a young man doing such a great job, but he's including his wife and his daughter with him in every area of his life, you know, regardless as to what's going on. He's making sure that he's that same type of father that you're there. And so, but punishment is necessary. What do you say about punishment?
Okay, one thing I want to say about that is some parents try too hard to be harsh on their children in punishment. And that was a model that we call cultural transmission. In slavery days, whenever the slave displeased the master, they would beat them to no end, tie them to no end. And when it came to us having children, since we were out of slavery, we copied the way that the slave owner did. I mean, we beat the kids like unmercifully. And then we would say to them, I brought you into this world and I'll take you out, which signified the fact they thought that they owned you like the slave owner owned them. If they can ever get to the point to understand that they don't own you, that God allowed them to be under your care, and your job is to make sure that that child grows up feeling love, not just to get beat, but to feel affirmed as a child. And that all has to do with how punishment should come. And punishment should come with love.
Amen. Not necessarily to just beat them, but to give understanding. This is why I'm doing this. You know, there are consequences to your actions. And a parent is supposed to teach their child this, and it is really, really more effective when the father does it as well. But the mothers and the fathers, shall I say, when they work together. But all too often, children are disciplined, but they don't get the lesson.
Well,
Therefore, the discipline.
they don't get the lesson because the lesson is not clear coming from the parent. See, if you're clear, here again, I still say, nothing is communicated until something is understood. And we must make sure that our children understand us and that we understand them. And when we have that kind of connection, then you feel free to be what you can while I'm trying to guide you against the mistakes that you may have. But then you too have to understand that I'm not trying to control you, but to aid you into becoming all you can be.
Right. I like how you talked about the ownership, because a lot of people do feel like they own their children, but somebody told me years ago, which is children are little people. And so, in other words, it would help for us to understand, because they are little people, they deserve respect, love. They should not be abused, misused, and yet, and still, we have a world full of crimes against children. That's such a huge issue there. I probably shouldn't even mention it, because you can't do that all in 30 minutes. But how do you counsel those kids who have received abuse, regardless as to what type of form, from their parents, and especially if it was a father?
Well, one thing, and you mentioned when you were coming on the air that I've been a surrogate father for many kids. I've got a bunch of kids. I mean, so many. And it's because that they can feel coming from me what they should feel from their parents. So then the real biological parent may not be in someone's life, but there should be someone who has a good image that will care for them and to help to show them on the right way. I had a father last night I was talking to, really wanted to be with his son. But sometimes the mother is so bitter that she doesn't want the child to have anything to do with the father. And that's a mistake. Now, one thing I can say about your mothers, they never tried to keep you from me. And that way I felt free that we could talk when we wanted to talk. You knew where I was, I knew where you were. And that's the kind of relationship, but I never felt like I owned you.
Awesome, awesome. We do have a question, or two questions. Do you think parents should know their children's love languages, and is that helpful in raising them?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You know, each person have their own, as you just said, love language. You have to know what it is that makes that child operate in its best potential. And then you aid that child in that particular way. So yes, we need to know our children and stop trying to put us into them,
Mm.
but for them to be able to learn who they need to be by watching the parent, as the parent is open, saying, hey, what would you like to do? Now, obviously, you say, well, I'd like to go rob a bank. Then I got to say, I can jump on you and say, look, you ever do something like that, I'll kill you. No, I have to be able to say to you now, that is not the right way to do it. Because if you do it, these are the consequences. Then I can gently lead you into a way that you should be. Now, that's the way it should happen. But what happens many times, the child leaves home not feeling loved. So they go to where they feel loved, and too many times it's in the game. In the game, they say, hey, man, I understand you, my bro. Come on in. And they're taken in, but what's missing is the love. When that child feels love, they're reluctant to go against what they've been taught.
What do you say about those parents who have conditional love for their children?
Well, That's not good for a child. A child has to know that even though I may not meet all of the conditions, I'm loved. Once that child feels that, then that means that they don't have to try to compete. Or like tomorrow morning, I'm going to talk about in the sermon, they don't have to try to do something to get your approval, that they're already approved. Once they know that, then, it's easier for you to discipline the child, to rear the child. But if the child ever feels like you don't care for me anyway, that's when you're on a wrong road. So then we as parents, we must be able to understand that our children are different and we cannot make them be like us. But what we can do is be examples of real love.
In other words, we have to let our children know that we are not disappointed with them, even if they make a mistake, but we are disappointed with the consequences resulting from some of their decisions.
Yes, you're right. That's why we have to teach them wisdom.
And a lot of people lack that going out into the world. I work in human resources, so we see it all, because you listen. I'm a people person, so I'm always listening, I'm watching. And basically, when you listen, you can tell what type of parenting a person has just by listening to them talk. You don't have to say a word, but their actions show you, then they line it up with words. And then I'm like, wow, I wish we could go back in time and possibly do things a little bit differently in your area, because some of my coworkers, they're harsh with others, and then they think it's everybody else. But then when you listen to their stories, they were raised in those atmospheres, so for them that's their normal, but it doesn't mean that it works in the rest of the world.
True. And like my normal is different from your normal. And when you have people in the field that you work in, when people come in, first of all, they want things to be the way they were when they were growing up. And they do not see the change. We have got to be willing to change the way that we work with our kids. Like right now, you're just a child to me that you've always been, because I tell people all the time, you work very hard, you do everything right, but when you come to me, you revert to that little child. And that's because of the love. That's because I try to kiss you on your neck and you still don't want me to do that. But I'm allowing you to be a child because all of us have a child in us. But at the same time, to be very mature in your approach to life. And that's what you should see in the parent. And that's what the parent should be to the children.
In other words, they don't have to be perfect, but understanding, because the parental, and in this particular case, the fatherly role has to adapt to the changes of the family or the children, to have us work together towards a model that works for our family, as opposed to doing what you see somebody else doing.
That's correct. So,
Yes.
one thing that we have to understand is when we say norm, and that means just what most of the people do. So like if you say, what number would you choose between 1 and 10? Most people will go to the middle, like 4 or 5, because they want to be quote unquote normal. So we have to understand what the norm is and how does that norm interact with the way parents and children react to each other. Now you get some mothers and fathers who feel like they gotta be, I guess what you call partners with their kids. So the kids are wearing different kinds of clothing now and want to get out on the floor. And you see the parents not trying to do what the kids do. But that should be like, the child should always know, hey, this is my best friend, but not my playmate.
Mhm.
Because sometimes we destroy that child's desire to come to us for advice when they're still where we are, or vice versa. So, you know, whenever any of you come into my presence, you know, I say, hey, what's going on with you? And you all, you laugh, and you know your daughter's gonna be your daughter. She's gonna tell you what she feels, and she doesn't care. Okay, but like now you're a little different, so I appreciate that. Then you get Lawrence. Lawrence is kind of like quiet, and he's not gonna talk a lot. But Chris, you know, Chris is kind of, he like assume that big brother role. So what I do is I understand the difference in you, and I don't expect from you what I expect from Lawrence. I expect you to be Patrina, and
Right.
you're uniquely you. And if we can ever get to the point that we can say and allow our children to be unique, then they know they're special.
Awesome. We have another question from someone in the audience. It says, what are some ways that parents can deal with their wounds or their own issues to prevent them from passing them on to their children?
Well, one thing they need to do is to understand their own weaknesses and admit that this is a weakness that I have, but never stop trying to grow in your weaknesses and making sure that the children know that, you know, like, this is not the way I want you to be. I'm your parent, but I'm not perfect. So what I'd like for you to do when I'm doing something that I'm at fault with, please don't say, hey, I'm going to do it because I saw you do it. So the child can receive the fact that the parent is not perfect. They can receive that. But what they don't receive is when you're whipping them and making them be, and you tell them to lie all the time. Right now, when I was coming up, I wouldn't like that. Don't do that. Let them know that, okay, I know I'm wrong. And I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I have made or I am making. So when they can understand that you can understand where you are, then they can have room to grow to be what they can be.
Awesome. I know I tried that with my kids to try to show the difference. Hey, I blew it over here. What I should have done was this. This is the better answer. And I wasn't afraid to show them that I have, you know, my own faults, my own mistakes, or I make my own mistakes, but I'm always trying to learn from them. What's the point of having a mistake and keep repeating them if I don't ever learn the lesson? We have another question. Do you think that a woman that grew up with their father will have a different interaction with a man than a woman that grew up without their father?
Most definitely. Because you see, when we were talking a while ago, the child gets the fatherhood image from their father. If the father is absent and they don't have another fatherly figure in their lives, then it comes out later on in life and they don't know how to deal with fatherhood or motherhood. So what has to happen is that there needs to be that fatherly figure. Now, I have to say this, and that is the fact that most mothers in a single parent home do a marvelous job. But a mother can't be a father. And that's why the child has, well, you take if a child doesn't feel accepted by their father. Sometimes you have that child going out after men and sometimes giving up too much so they'll feel loved and needed and wanted. So, and they'll do that thinking it's all right, but what they're really doing, they're trying to find the father that they never had.
Right. I know that in a couple of instances, I've even had to tell male children, watch out, this demon is lurking at you because you don't feel loved from your father. You're willing to receive any type of affirmation from a man, and sometimes you'll let down your guard and it can take you to places where you don't want to go. In other words, sometimes we find that young men, not all of them, but a good portion of them, because they're seeking that affirmation from their own father, because that's a need within them, that they're willing to go into sexual encounters with other men in order to be affirmed as a man. And so we don't understand that that's a demonic attack coming against those children who feel like I don't have, it happens for both the males and the females is the point I'm trying to bring out. And we have to learn how to be a little bit more alert, I believe, when somebody's seeking that fatherly love or attention. And these young people today are a little bit more aggressive about it. They'll just go make a father, So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. But I'm glad to know that there's still some parents who are concerned about loving their children. Now, in some cases, if mom is too angry from what has happened before, and she will not allow the child have a relationship with the father. But then there are other mothers, what they'll do, they'll call the child's father, come over here and beat this child. So they're only seen as ones who come to punish. But when they can see that now my child needs me and I want to show them love. And one thing I've learned, that even if the mother will keep the kids from their father, one day that child is going to grow up and they're going to find out also that mama didn't have it all right too. And then they turn around and be bitter at mama because she did not allow them to know where their father is. I know many fathers who would love to have a relationship with their children, but mama is still angry and bitter that she doesn't want them in her life.
As a form of punishment is what it is. They're trying to punish the father.
Correct.
Using the children to say, you're not going to see these kids for whatever reason, because you didn't maintain a relationship with me. So then they use, again, the kids as a tool, but at the same time, sometimes we have to realize maybe that relationship wasn't designed to last forever anyway, because we had too many negatives as opposed to positives. So it wasn't going to make it anyway.
Well, you're right. You're right. So the main thing is being able to see what's going on. Many times parents make mistakes and don't realize they're making mistakes. And that's why when you hear me preaching, I always try to get a little teaching in there too, because many parents say, oh, I've learned so much. Now I can relate to my children differently. So many times parents want to relate to their children, but they just don't know how.
Okay, that's good. And it's okay to say we don't know how. Just because we're the parent, we don't have to know everything.
Correct. But it's being able to acknowledge that you don't know everything, and the willingness to go to somebody who does know, and that makes a difference.
What do you say to those fathers who try to keep a relationship with their kids, but only to find that they are actually pushing them away from them. You know, they're getting the exact opposite of what they really want.
Well, here again, where the father should be willing to say, hey, you're my child. I want to know what you're thinking. If I'm not treating you the way that you need to be treated, tell me, what am I not doing that you'd like for me to do? Now, that way, what you're doing is opening the line of communication with your children. And when you do that, you're going to find that they will be willing to open up. But then you can't tell them, I tell you, child, I tell you what you do. You can always come talk to me and you can tell me everything. And then the child comes and start telling you what they've been doing. You're saying, what? What? You're under punishment for the next 6 months. Now, the next time they come back saying, okay, now you can tell me, no, I can't tell you because I can't trust you.
Right.
So child feels that I must be able to trust my mother and father, that I can tell them whatever I'm going through. Now, my mother and my father, that's the way they treated me. I could tell them where I was wrong. I never got scolded. What they did was try to show me the right way. And that's what I've tried to pass on to you all.
One of the greatest lessons you taught me, besides knowing Jesus, is that I have options. And I remember I was young, maybe 17, 18. I came to you with a particular issue I was considering, you know, making a decision about. And you said, this is your way. This is how everybody else is doing it, but this is God's way. So you make a decision. You said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but here are your options. From there, I learned how to see that there are options no matter what situation I'm in.
Correct, correct.
And that has helped me tremendously. And we have to teach that, I believe, as well to our children. You know, but as parents, we have to know that we have options, that just because I'm parenting this way doesn't mean that it's the foolproof plan. I have to be open to doing it better, doing parenting, whether it's mothering or fathering, better.
And that's so true. You know, many times parents think, okay, the way mama taught me, it was all right. So I'm teaching you this. And they're not willing to say that sometimes mom and dad were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But people say, oh no, you can't, I cut my teeth on this. But you might better go back and recheck to see where mama was right or wrong. And then have that willingness as a child not to do the things that mom and dad did that were wrong. So what I've always tried to say to you, and I do that in counseling too, I cannot say for you what you need to do. But what I can do is point out the ramifications of what could happen if you do it this way. Now the choice is yours, because you're going to shoulder the responsibility, or you're going to shoulder the reward.
Another thing you helped me, which with dealing with my kids, was you told me never leave them where they don't have hope. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yes. You should be the main person. And I say you, I mean father and mother, where your child can come to you feeling like, hey, it's not the end. There is a way out. And if the parent can show a better way out than what they're experiencing, then they're more willing to try it that way. But it has to be done in love. You can't beat me half to death yesterday and then try to tell me what to do tomorrow. I've got to feel that you really love me and that you're not going to try to kill me when I tell you what I'm really thinking. But what I can do, if you let me, I can tell you what I feel, then you show me where I'm wrong.
So in other words, our love determines the sense of security that the children have, and if they feel that that relationship is locked down, secure, that they should feel free to be able to come to mom or dad with any issue. And it's a way to say everything now, but I'm just saying.
I'm sure you might remember. I can't tell it all on here now, but you and I and another young woman were out one night, and you just said something about a woman's, and you know what I'm talking about. And you just said went through it, and I never even paid attention. So when you got away, you said, you said that in front of your dad. You said, oh, he can hang. Remember that?
Yeah, because again, you counsel everybody, all types of people, regardless as to the situations. So we feel like if they can go talk to him, well, why can't I?
Correct.
So that opened the door up for us to talk to you about a lot of stuff. And then another thing that I appreciate about you, if you help me, you don't run and tell the next person, and then I got to hear that my dad is bragging that he helped me. Can you talk about that? Because some parents do that. They help their kids and then they go tell everybody else.
Well, that's the one thing you could never do. What is between you and me should be between you and me. Because if you're going to publicize everything that we talk about or the weaknesses that I have, then I don't need you. I need somebody who will be confidential. So, what I'm counseling or whatever I do now, I will say to people, before I ever say anything about this, I need to know that I have your permission to do it, because you are important enough that I do not tell about what your issues are.
Right. Because some people don't understand family traditions of talking about all the family members' business is actually pushing family members away. You see contentions, and I'm like amazed how some people were talking about. It's one thing for me to talk about my business, but when you talk about another family's business to member's business to another family member, so as to keep them in the know. For what? If they're not helping, why do they have to know everything?
Well, that's true. But what has to happen also, you see now, the parent on the other end needs to be reaffirmed by the child. So when we start talking about communication, it goes both ways. So when the child, just like for you or your daughter or Tiffany, sometimes I just feel the need to call you, like I called you last week and said, hey, what's going on here? Now, I need your love too. And I want to be not just the authority figure,
Okay.
but I need to know that what I feel for you is returned. And before that can be a good relationship, that kind of love needs to be returned. So when you bought me my sneakers, and I never wore sneakers a lot, but I think I wear them every day now because my child gave them to me. You understand?
Yes.
That's what children should do for their parents. And once the parent, you see what that does, it helps to create an atmosphere of mutuality, how you can trust each other, be mutual in your trust.
Awesome. We only have 5 minutes left, but what would be two, I would say 3 of your words of advice that you have for a father?
My advice for a father would be, number one, I think fatherhood becomes better when we know what the Lord requires of us. That if a father will learn what the Lord requires of us, and then number two, it makes sure that that child feels loved. And then number three, be available. I don't care how busy you are, but be available when you know that that child needs to talk. So when you've got love, understanding what the father is, then being willing to be available to talk, even if it's difficult to do that. Now, those are the three things that will help a child begin to put a trust in a father. So much trust that one day, when that child begins to be successful, they're gonna always want to go back and say, my father taught me this, or my mother taught me this. That's when you know that as a parent, you've done what you need to do. And if there's anyone listening now who are not sure that you've been a good parent or not, maybe you should go to someone that can help you with your issues, because you cannot be a good parent to your child and you got more issues than your child got. So let's try to work through your issues so that you won't make them all over your kids.
Right. And then will you please share words of encouragement on those who are grieving the loss of their fathers?
Yes, I will, because grief is a very strong emotion with people who have lost their fathers. Now, psychologists like to say that sometimes you can get someone who can substitute, in other words, the image that the father had in the child, like a substitute. But while doing that, you know, that serenity prayer, Lord, help me to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So then sometimes when you lose that father, it's a sobering thing. Now, where do I go from here? And then once you can get some guidance, then allow yourselves to heal from that wound, then you can make it. It's not going to come overnight, but you can't get to a point you say, well, I just can't make it without him. No, you can't do that, because the God that we serve does not want you to spend the rest of your life hurting. And once we learn that, then he'll teach us how to become well.
Amen. Amen. I think that's really, really powerful. With anyone who has lost anyone, I think you're bringing out the point. You have to decide to heal, you know, because a lot of people say they don't realize they're making a decision to not get over the hurt or the loss or the pain. And what do you say about them getting counseling if they get stuck in their grief?
Well, one thing I say is, you know, whatever you say continuously in your subconscious mind, you're putting it to a point that you brainwash yourself. So that's why you should never say anything negative about yourself. I can't do this. I won't be able to get over this. I can't see that. And that same child, the same person will go to church and say, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Now, how can you say I can do all things? Well, what about getting over lost your love? I just can't do that. You see where the problem is? So the thing is, work through your grief, knowing that even though people tell you you'll never get over that, you can say to them, that's not the way God wants me to be, because God can heal my woundedness. And once your children can see you being healed, then they'll know that they can be healed too.
Amen. And someone else just said, it is okay to grieve the loss. Just remember to celebrate the love.
Oh yes, oh yes. Don't just think about the bad part of losing them. But you see, grief also includes what we call reminiscing. I used to like to hear this lady sing this song, and she said that her father was a cussing man, and said one day the truck ran over the brand new fence, and so much cussing they did that day. All right, but she would laugh about that. Why? Because it was remembering something that had some good times, even though that wasn't right when they do it, but it was so funny that she shared that laughter with somebody else. So, you know, you got to remember the good points and thank God that you got some good memories, and that can help you heal from the bad memories.
And I've learned, even with the loss of your father, granddad, it was then I learned how to thank God for the opportunity to be able to love.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and we fail that. We look at, like you said, we focus on what we lose, but we don't always focus on what we have left, and that is that love, the good memories, the good times, the lessons learned, the time we had together. And again, I love this statement. It's okay to grieve the loss. Just remember to celebrate the love. And I think that's a good note for us to end on. But I do want to thank you, Dad, for being a part of today's show here at Church Biz, where we talked about the essence of a father, what makes up a father and a mother too, because you have to have a mom and a father to be here. But also, we want to thank WCEG Network and Reverend Penny Rogers, who's doing the work behind the scenes to keep the show on the air.
She
And
does a good job.
excellent, excellent, and very, very inspirational person herself. One of my boon coons, one of my best friends, in case somebody didn't know what a boon coon was. But I want to thank our listeners, those who are tuning in because they wanted to hear a word from you on today about the father figure. And so thank you everybody for tuning in to be with us here on WCEG Network's Church Biz. I am your host, Reverend Patrina White McClure, and I hope that as you celebrate your fathers on next weekend, not tomorrow, but for the rest of your life, that you keep God first and foremost, first, as well as understand that He is your Heavenly Father. He loves you. He celebrates you. And just do what God has for you to do. Be blessed. Take care.
You too, baby.